I would say specific stories that come to mind. Odette and I were talking about a story that we actually worked on separately, but it was the same story, and it was about a young Muslim man in the suburbs who was dying of leukemia and required a bone marrow transplant. And it was very hard to find a match, and it was very hard to find a match in that particular ethnic community. And so the mosques in that community organized bone marrow drives to registration drives so that people could come forward and find out if they were a match. It was a really beautiful, positive community service that the community had come together in honor of this young man. Sadly, before the bone marrow drives really took off, he died very unexpectedly of an unexpected infection in the hospital. And the bone marrow drives went on. The community still came out and donated. And so Odette and I both interviewed people for that story, and we talked about some of the different quandaries that we encountered on that story.
Yeah, so I ended up actually interviewing an imam at the mosque where one of the bone marrow drives was happening, and it turned out that he himself had been ill in the same way, and he himself had needed a bone marrow transplant, and he got it. And he got it because he had a brother who was a match for him. And in the interview, when he told me this, I said, well, that was really lucky that there was a solution so close at hand, your own brother. And he said, no, it wasn't luck. It was God's will. And I said, oh, was it God's will that this 15-year-old boy should die? And, you know, that was, I'll have to say, I mean, just sort of, from my personal point of view, I found that a difficult thing to listen to. And how do you report something like that where, you know, where somebody might be saying, well, you know, some people deserve to live and others may not, even if it's within their own religious community or ethnic group or whatever. I didn't actually end up putting that man in the story for other reasons, but you know, Manya and I were talking about, well, what do you do when you hit against that almost like a wall of faith where people don't necessarily, they can't necessarily articulate a reason for their thinking that makes sense if you don't, you know, if you are not of that faith yourself. And what you can do is just sort of report the facts as they happened. This boy died, you know, but there are other people in that ethnic group that have been able to find bone marrow donors, and this is how they process it. So, Manya.
And the bone marrow drive itself, I mean, there was religious motivation. I mean, these people were inspired by their faith, by the generosity that their faith teaches, to come together and take part in this drive. So that was one aspect of faith that was part of the story. But also, you know, when talking to people about those, how they're processing these kinds of situations, I think religion writers, it's important that they probe. It's important that not just religion writers, reporters in general probe to try to get to that why that I was talking about at the beginning. Well, why do you believe that it was God's will? Does that bring you comfort? Does it somehow put the world in order for you, and that's how, is it a coping mechanism, or, you know, does it say something like to that effect in scripture? Where are you getting this? And just kind of probe and go deeper until you finally uncover the why of that. Now, the why that and you know, Odette mentioned that she was kind of uncomfortable with that, hearing that, because, you know, it's God's will, but that's not a fact, that's faith. And so you have to, you know, when you're doing a religion story, balance the facts of the story, the reason why he got ill, the reason why he needed a bone marrow transplant, the reason why he died, but also the faith that goes into helping people process it, the process. That's what's important there. Kevin, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, this week, just yesterday, we saw a family in Oregon who was convicted of second-degree manslaughter because their baby was born premature and they didn't call a doctor. And the baby ended up dying after 9 hours. And they belong to a church that does not believe in medicine and only believes in faith healing. And this is the 4th family in 2 years from this one church that has been convicted of either involuntary manslaughter or criminal mistreatment or something like that. And this is a community that firmly believes that doctors do no good, that there's no reason to call 911, and even if you did, it wouldn't make a difference. Now, they've got a whole cemetery full of dead kids because of this. And, what do you do with that? So I think what you do is you present, like Manya said, the facts, and the facts that we know, and the facts that we were able to assess, based on the evidence we have. But then you have to, when people say that they believe something, there is a certain element of having to take them at their word. Faith is not something you can prove. I mean, that's the whole idea.